welcome to Faith Fitness Family Podcast. This is episode 8, and I have my dear friend Ashley with us, and we're going to talk a lot about life, fitness, all of the things. She has been with me for a long time. I can't even track.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day. Yeah. We have to do math, and so that's not going to happen.
And a lot of you have probably seen our fun reels with the butt shakes and all the fun, but we're going to be serious today.
Yeah, to the best of our ability.
We're going to chat. Her story is pretty amazing, and I just can't wait for you all to hear, learn, and just the goal of every episode is to be real and to share what has worked and what hasn't worked, and just to be helpful.
Yeah. I hope somebody can learn something from my story.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it just means that I'm one in a bajillion.
Yeah.
Which hasn't been the case thus far in life. So,
share a little bit about your kind of fitness journey. We could go back to high school. We've talked. I mean, we've been on we just got back from. Well, it's been since June. The Ultra. You were there. It was. She's the biggest
If you
want Ashley in your corner to cheer you on to do hard things. So it's not just her doing hard things. She cheers you on, and
that was a fun day.
It was so good. But we got to chat. We talked for hours that night about life, and
we did.
Because we were kind of close to your hometown growing up.
Took you to see my grandma.
Yes.
Yep.
So cute.
Where her front yard, she had you strawberry shortcake.
Yep.
Which Gabby loved.
Oh yes.
That was such a fun time, and I think it was because we had built a friendship, and then, but it, it's just being down here and very superficial in terms of how much we can engage and how much time we can spend together.
Yeah.
And that day, it was okay, I'm going to take you to see my grandparents. I'm going to take you to the town that I grew up in.
Crazy.
And then we went to Flagstaff, and I got to really see, too, what that process was like for you. And that was a wild day. But then I got to be with the kids.
Yes.
I mean, and I felt too, if nothing else in that day, which you and Jared have talked about on a podcast, for me, my role, I did my 4-mile race. Got back.
You felt amazing doing.
Loved it.
Loved
it. 4 miles is where it's at.
4 miles is great.
Yeah, it was so good.
4 miles and that's it.
And but that day it was just okay, God had me here because I love my friend and I love to see her, and I love seeing you do really epic stuff because I'm not doing it.
Stop.
But that day it was okay, I'm going to be the person that I have the kids. And so they were doing this climbing thing, and I was able to just be with them while Jared was taking care of you and pacing you and all those things. But literally up until about 20 minutes before you crossed the finish line that day, I was with the kids and they were busy. And so it was they never really had an opportunity to absorb what you were doing and what was happening, even though they were a little nervous because they overheard Jared telling somebody Mommy's lost. And literally out of nowhere, all 3 of them though, they were right in front of us. So there's this whole thing that they can be on. And when Jared's telling somebody Amanda's lost, they're all right there. And they stop dead cold, and they turn around and they're what? And I was it's okay. Mommy's okay. It's fine. They found her. She's fine. And then Jared starts walking, and I'm dude, you got to come over here and tell these kids what's going on because they just heard you. And so, and then to see you finish and the whole thing. And then that night and the conversations and just laughing, even still we text each other and we're that night was so fun.
It's just bringing back, I can't believe this is kind of off the cuff.
I know.
But we weren't even planning on talking about it, but I don't know. It's having a friend to do this stuff with is just a treasure. So, yeah.
And that conversation though is where we were talking about you running.
Yes.
And then with me, it was more blue collar family. I grew up in a construction family in a small town. I started basketball when I was in 3rd grade. That was it. That was the only option we had. So I did, and I played, and I loved it. But I was, on an even kill at that point in terms of how tall I was.
Yes. Super tall.
Yeah, and at that time though, I was I was your average height. But it worked and it was fine. I didn't know the difference. And then I actually played football. I played tackle football for a couple years in middle school.
Really?
I sure did.
I don't remember us
I
talking.
sure did.
That's
And I had to think
awesome.
about, because I was like, where did like my fitness journey really start?
Yeah.
And I did. I played tackle football with the boys. I played defense. I was
Wow.
defensive back. I broke my wrist twice, actually. Once playing football, once on a go-kart.
Okay.
We were wild. But that was, and you know, in a small town, we just did what we did. My sister was a cheerleader. That was her thing. I wanted to play football. I wanted to be on the field. That's
awesome.
what we did in the summertime. And then in middle school, I started volleyball.
Okay.
And then the transition for me, I played basketball, but the transition for me happened from 8th to 9th grade. I went from being the point guard of the basketball team to the power forward. I grew like 4 inches that summer, and it just transformed like the way that I loved sports and the role that I played in sports. And then I really attribute sports to kind of saving me from making some really poor decisions. I was wild, which I feel like would not be hard to believe, but I was a wild a teenager.
Yeah.
And so sports kind of
kept you as grounded as, and you're in your situation, because that's a whole nother story for another day. Honestly, It's not perfect, but the way you have overcome so much and finding like that outlet is huge.
Yeah.
Like finding like community in the volleyball and in the people that you're surrounding with.
Yeah. And those, I mean, you know how it is when you're in the grind with somebody, you get close whether you want to be or not. And so a lot of those girls, I mean, were my childhood friends, and a few of them, you know, we've stayed friends for decades. That's all where it started, though. For me, it was like working with my dad, my poppy. You know, my poppy worked so hard his whole life, and he would take us kids in the summer, and my grandma would pay for us to go to these really amazing sports camps.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so as a kid, that was it.
It's cool to see how they have impacted your life, like visiting with your grandma and poppy.
Oh, yeah.
They're so sweet.
And everybody loves them.
They love you. And they love you. And having that love.
Thankfully. They put up with me for a long time.
I mean, well, that's...
But now you know, like with my grandma, I feel like when it comes to fitness too, and we were talking about it that day at her house, because I was trying to figure out her timeline of different things, because she was just epic, like the whitewater rapid. And I was
How old was she when she did the whitewater?
I thought she was 50 when she stopped. She said she was like 65, 70.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she quit doing that. Yeah, but that's how she, hiking and being outside, and I mean, that's just like being on the go, even still to this day. Like, she swims all summer. I get notifications on my watch.
That's amazing.
And, you know, it just, like, that's her deal. She gets her fulfillment, among other things, from just being active.
And I feel like I've listened to a different podcast. She was interviewing an 85-year-old woman, and she's active, walks 5 miles a day. And she's like, I could just sit and watch TV all day, or I could be a part of my life and enjoy life. Yep. And that's what your grandma's doing.
She takes care of everybody else.
If anyone makes me strawberry shortcake, they're my favorite. I love it. I'm like, this is like my favorite sister. How did she know?
Yeah, and that's her. I mean, to a T, just like having something on the table, whether it's cookies or a full meal, you know, cooking for us growing up, that was her jam, and she was sure good at it. She just posted the other day on Facebook, and she was like, you know, when my kids were in school, I would make them a lunch, and it would just be like basic stuff, and I'd send them a note that said, when you get home, do your homework, do your chores, you know, all these things. And I was like, but Graham, for all of us grandkids, I mean, we got notes of love and affirmations, and we got these epic lunches. You know, she would have to bring us lunch every once in a while, and it was always the best. I'm like, so I don't know what you did for them kids, but I know for us kids, like our generation, you were top notch. And she's like, amazing. It's just different.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, but for me in my world, like, I can't imagine her sending me with a PB&J. You know?
Gourmet meal, here we go.
Yeah. So,
what an impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
They're all of them, you know, like my family growing up, we were all very close. And in a small town, that's just kind of how it was.
So taking it from that small town, you went to NAU.
I did.
Okay, let's talk about that, how you, like that transition, your job, where you found running.
man.
We have a lot to unpack in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But I think it just is like sets a trajectory of where you are now.
Yeah.
You know, like all these like circumstances that you've been through, and I think it's going to be huge to help and share with others.
Yeah, so I started college in Flagstaff. Flagstaff is a big running community. And honestly, when I showed up there, I was terrified. I spent a lot of time thinking I didn't belong there. I was miserable. I tell, some kids who are really nervous, they'll, be starting college and it'll be time to move away. And I'll tell them it's okay to be scared because I have been there, but you've got to keep going.
Cried for like a month.
Yes. And I would.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times where, like, it's funny because with my grandma, I would call her in the beginning and just beg her to let me come home. Like, I don't need to do this. I don't like doing this.
Right.
But for her, that was her only option for me. I had, there's 12 in my generation, and with me in particular, she was like, you're going to go to college. This is it. So I get there, and I'm like, oh, no, this isn't, like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was done, though, I mean, I'm calling her at 4 a.m. in the middle of writing a thesis for a master's degree. I mean, that's how far I had come. And so I get there, right? And I'm miserable, but over time, I got a roommate that was into running and fitness, and so we found ourselves in the thick of a running community, and that was kind of where it started. We didn't have watches. I couldn't tell you how far we went. I couldn't tell you what paces I was going. Yeah. I just remember, like, there was a group of us, and we would run from the bottom to the gate of Snowball, and we would go up and down. And I remember doing it like it was nothing.
Wow.
Like, that's how crazy. Yeah. And I would do it all. I mean, we would run all the time. We'd go to the track. The setup was a little different. We did not have the huge fitness center that exists today at NAU. But yeah, I mean, and I mean, my focus was on school. I knew I wanted to get a master's degree, so I finished my bachelor's in 3 years.
And you work, I'll share, you work in social work?
I do.
Yes.
So I came out of there, graduated, started with the Department of Child Safety. I was with them for 5 years, and then I went out on my own. And when I was at DCS, Kenny and I had our first son, Cannon. 2 years, a little over 2 years later, I have Coleman. Okay. And at this time, we're starting to see Cannon has some delays. And so I'm huge pregnant in the summer. Coleman is an August baby. And I just remember thinking, I can't do this. Like, I can't maintain driving downtown at 6 o'clock in the morning, coming home at, 8 o'clock at night. So God showed up for me big. And it's funny because I feel like God prepared my entire life to be where I'm at right now. So, like, I know that we're going to get there and we're going to talk about, like, present day. But stop.
I know.
But God showed up for me and was like, I'm going to give you opportunity. Like, you're going to go and you're going to get this degree and this degree, which is, it's higher. It's more significant in terms of an education level. But it's going to put you in a position so that someday when, your 2-year-old is absolutely losing his mind, he has no sense of direction or safety or any of those things, like, you're going to be able to quit your government job and go out on your own, and you're going to be okay.
That's amazing.
And literally, I had so Cannon was about 2.5. I have Coleman. The first time that Cannon was evaluated was shortly after that, so about 6 months later. So this is the end of 2015. Okay. Beginning of 2016, he's not talking. He was very delayed in walking. He started walking when he was 2. Okay. He didn't crawl till he was 10 months. Wow. He wouldn't respond to his name. He wasn't really into eye contact. And so just little things, from my job at DCS, I had learned about children and babies with delays. And so I was able to unpack all of that and say, okay, this is what I need to do. I know what to do.
Good. Yeah.
And so I did, and Cannon would be diagnosed with autism at 4.5.
Okay.
And it was, up until that time, I felt like I needed to fix him. And I've talked to Jared about this before, because I remember telling him, I felt like I could just start to live. Like, once I could get a diagnosis and I could understand it wasn't about fixing him or changing him or doing anything. It was just, let's live. And so literally we did. We just started living, At that point, I had gotten back to running. we're at about 2018 now.
Yes.
I start running as an adult. I have no sense of what I'm doing. So I'm just out in these streets, just running.
But running for the mental.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but, no coach, no plan, just a group of women. And they would say, let's go to the wash on this day and this time. I just show up and be like, okay. And I remember the first time I did it, thankfully, some very patient women were there that day because I was slower than molasses. And they would run, and then they would stop. And I'd catch up, and then they would run. And sometimes they'd come back. But
was that like a healing balm for your life? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
I feel like so many, the different places we've lived, I need to find a running community.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there's something special about that.
1,000%.
Totally different people coming together.
And yes. And that was why I loved it so much, is because,
they walk the journey with you.
Yes. And I think you can relate to this too, but like, you don't always want people in your circle that are just like you. And, we talk about in just life in general, like, you don't want to be around everybody who thinks the same and does the same and looks the same.
Exhausting and boring.
Right. and that's how, there's a dozen women that none of them are just like me.
Good.
Politically, religious, the spectrum of all these things, right? And we're all different. None of us are the same.
Of that.
And so being brought together with running, to me was the most powerful part of it all. Like, we could have been fine, right? Like, if none of us met, we would have been fine. But the fact that we were all together, it was like, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep showing up for these women, because what if I don't? What if they're by themselves, or, they think I'm coming and I don't? And so for a long time, that's what got me up and out of bed, at 4:00 in the morning or whatever it was.
Did that give you more strength going through the process with Cannon, getting him the help that he needed and all of that?
Yeah, we were in the thick of it.
I know, because I remember when we first met, I wish I could just, like, the night and how much he's like grown. It's like, I want to cry. Like, even the picture you sent yesterday of him, like, this is like amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
he's a very happy boy.
He's so funny.
He comes up in here like he owns this place.
He totally does. He kind of does. That's fine. And honestly, what I have learned in hindsight is it literally took us a decade, because Cannon just turned 10. Wow. And
it took us a decade, 10 years, but it all came full circle for him. All those, when I was running and I had just started, and then I was building, I ran my first half marathon, but all of that was in the thick of Cannon getting services and habilitation. And it was a full-time job. There was a time where we would calculate, he had about 45 hours of therapy a week.
That's amazing.
And it was speech, occupational, physical therapy, and then he had habilitation and respite.
Wow.
And that was his life. And which meant that it had to be my life.
On top of your job.
Yes.
On top of training.
Yes.
On top of it all.
Yes.
Okay. I think everyone needs to soak that in.
Yeah. I feel like it's normal because it's all that I have ever known is the balancing act.
And I feel like God put you, because you were the perfect mom for him.
Yeah. And I would agree with you.
Because I don't know if I don't know who else could do this.
You just have to.
I know, but I feel like everything is for a reason, right? We talk about that all the time, but I just don't know if you realize how incredible you are.
Oh gosh.
And what you've done.
Well, I have to.
I know.
And that's, what it all comes down to for me is this gym is like a sanctuary. And I know that it's that way for a lot of people who come here. To some extent, this is our release. And
right, yeah.
It's nothing now like it was 5 years ago. My mental health and, just everything I've had to overcome in the last 3 years.
Right, yes.
For myself personally.
All of us, for sure.
Right, has been rough.
Yeah.
But I mean, right now it all feels worth it is the thing. Like, I know that I was having really hard days 5 years ago with Canon. It was rough.
In the thick of it. Yeah.
Yes. And so when I think about that, it's like, oh, we can do anything. Like the unknown of his adult life, the unknown of high schools, the unknowns of girlfriends and families and education and, you know, all these things. It's like, it doesn't matter because we've been at the bottom of the barrel and it's never going to be like that.
That is amazing perspective. No, because I feel like some of us, me included, I'm like, why is this happening? So, you know, you do the why thing. Yeah. And it's like, no, like we are going to go through hardships. We are going to have things. And it's how we overcome them and be like, I went through that because I can go through this right now. Or I can handle this. Or I'm so much stronger than I was 5 years ago. You are not the same Ashley you were 5 years ago.
Oh, no.
I hope we're I'm not the same Amanda I was 5 years ago.
Right.
We're always growing. And
that's how I feel like that's all that it's been for is growth and this opportunity to make ourselves a little bit better every day. And I know that I don't have to do this. I don't have to be here. I am very much of the mindset that I get to do this.
It's good.
I love coming to the gym. I like seeing, you know, friends and other women and runners who come in. I love seeing those familiar faces. But I just love those moments where it's mindless, right? Like outside of having to ask you a million times, what is that? Or what are we doing? Or what is this exercise?
Right.
But
it helps to
the hour I'm here, it is mindless. Like I don't have to think about anything else.
And honestly, that has been the goal. Like we started off in the garage gym.
We sure
did. It was a dream to have a space. And honestly, like my heartbeat has always been having a place where men and women can come and feel safe, be their best versions of themselves, and have moments where they're just going to cry it out.
Yeah.
That's where this is what this is. I have found like running and working out has been a sanctuary for me in my journey and what I've gone through. And I mean, there's other ways to go through things, I guess, but I feel like you have to find some healthy form because we're all going to go through hard things.
Yep.
And so, yes, God is a huge, like he walks us through that journey, but he's given us these amazing gifts to be able to use them and feel that release and be around people in a community that's healthy.
Yeah. And I think too, though, it's like you go, as women in particular, we can go through phases of life where we don't feel like anybody else can relate to us or we can't relate to them or I don't look like them. You know, we watch the CrossFit games, you and I were like texting back and forth because it's just phenomenal. Like you just see these humans and you just think, you know, I can't relate to that, but maybe if I go to this place, I can relate to somebody there, you know, whatever it is. And so I just feel like for me, I don't fit the mold of a CrossFitter. I don't fit the mold of a runner. I don't even fit the mold of a weightlifter, period. But when I come here, I see other women who look like me and lift like me and can do things like me. And it's like, okay, I don't need to be
in this little pocket
the cookie,
of what the cookie cutter.
Yeah. I don't need to do all that to be successful in my own right.
To go PR a half marathon in a couple months. Let's, you know.
You be doing too much. You're talking out loud.
Throw it out there. Let's throw it out.
Telling all my secrets.
I love it.
Yeah, but I mean, since you mentioned that, like running, you know, it saved me in a sense with Canon when that was really hard. And then my dad passed away, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell you all the things I am never going to do.
This is when we first started together. She was not running.
I was not running. I wasn't lifting.
Healthy.
I wasn't. Yeah. This was like, I want to say it was June of 2020.
Okay.
I think. And
No, it was.
I had a friend who was doing the online, and I was like, okay, let me try
online
this.
With Amp Fitness.
Yes, you're Shred, but I don't think you called it. Did you call it Shred back then?
No, it's evolved.
The evolution. So, but honestly, that's where it was. And it was like, okay, post-pandemic, my dad passed away in January of 2020.
Crazy.
And I just shut out. And I was like, let me just, and it was not out loud, but it was for myself. And it was like, let me tell you all the things I am never going to do. And it was like swimming and running and going to church and having a relationship with God. It was like, I was done. I didn't want it. And so for about 6 months, I just sat in that alone, and I was okay with it. I was okay just feeling how I felt. And then my friend Katie, she was doing the online.
Yeah.
And I just remember asking her about it. And then I started. I think I reached out to you and just to get information. And so I started.
Yes.
But it was so hard to stay motivated every day. I had lost it, completely.
And to be online, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was not cut out for the online platform. And I reached out to Amanda and I was like, what do you think about personal training? I got these 2 little boys in tow, but maybe they'll sit on their iPads the whole time.
Right.
We didn't know.
Yeah, we were like,
we didn't know what they were going to do. But she was like, let's try and see what happens. And literally, I did. And I think I came twice a week.
Yes, to start. And we kind of eased you into the small group.
Yep. And then, bless their hearts, she had a small group. And I call them the 80 plus.
Oh.
And because that's what it was at the time.
Yes.
And I was like, and then there was me. And I was like, I'll be fine. And it was a transition. It definitely, the confidence of like some bigger lifts, the deadlifts, learning how to clean.
But to see, it was so cool to see the confidence coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm good at this. I can do this.
Yes. And I had forgotten that I was actually good at it. So we did that. I want to say I started in person with you in July or August. And I went through the end of the year. Mm-hmm. When the new year rolled around, I was like, okay, small group, here we go.
Pull off the Band-Aid, let's go.
Sure did, ripped it off. And the boys, my boys were good. They were able to go back to school. But literally they were so comfortable with you that they started to run amok. And they were just like, oh, we're going, to Amanda's house. Yeah.
I'm
and
like,
so,
wait a minute.
Yeah. And so we would be trying to do a workout. And it wasn't for very long.
No.
But the last couple weeks, it was like a free-for-all. Cannon was trying to do pull-ups.
Oh, yes.
Coleman was walking on your balance beam. I mean, I remember all of those things and just being like, we're going to make this the best. And you had the patience of a saint.
I tried.
It was like, maybe it's that teacher mindset.
Oh.
But I was like, I'm just going to go. I mean, after like 10 minutes of them running amok, I was like, this isn't going to work. But you were like, oh no, we're going to figure this out. It's only a couple more times. But then in the midst of all of that, we were still in the garage. And I think we were still doing PT because we had a crazy conversation. And you were like, oh, by the way, did I mention that my husband is a pastor?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yes. Yeah. I don't always share that fact because I just don't want that stigma, because we all have a stigma.
We were talking about a church story, though.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what it was.
I don't know how you got hurt with Cannon, remember? Because, that's the stuff that's the stigma. And I, don't want people to feel...
And that's what it was. We had stopped going to church years prior. And that, and again, it was like, these are all the things I'm not going to do after my dad had passed. And church was one of them. And it was like, we had tried, it didn't work. Cannon was very isolated.
Yeah, I just can't.
And I had told you about that. And it was like, if we can't go to church and be safe, then we're not going to do it anywhere. But I remember the thought of, I will never put Cannon in a situation where he doesn't feel like he should be there.
And that is... like the mom, that is you're the strongest advocate, and I would be the same way.
Yep.
Like everything in my power, I am going to protect my kids.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what it costs you. And that was my mindset, was I did not care. I did not care if we ever stepped foot in a church again. And I was telling you that story, and you said, did I tell you that my husband's a pastor? And I laughed out loud.
Yes. I remember
And I don't think I said anything.
Yeah.
Because then I left. Our session was done.
I think I called you.
And you did.
I'm sorry.
You called me and you were like, I'm so sorry. I don't want to offend you. Like, this isn't contingent on you going to church.
Yeah, like that's it. There's no strings attached here. Like,
yes.
I never want anyone to feel that weird pressure. I hate that pressure.
Yeah.
So, but then you were like, I might be open to it.
Yeah, I think I told you the story about my dad and how I felt like, okay, so all this fitness, everything, whenever I talk about God setting me up, like all this fitness and all this love of sports and all of these things I'd had my whole life, what are the chances that God would use that and say, let me get you back to church? Because my dad, that was his thing. I mean, my dad loved his church. He served his church. He, you know, all these different things, you know, in a small town. The church that we grew up in, my grandpa built. It was dedicated in the memory of my great-great-grandma, and my dad was a trustee, you know, and
all of that.
Yes. Yeah. And so it was very important to him. And when he was dying, he would tell my sister and I, whatever void you have for me, fill it with God.
That's good.
And literally my brain, I wouldn't say it to him, to my dad, but I would tell myself, like, there is no way. And so that day when that happened and you called me, I was like, I'm not offended. I just think it's funny because of all the things that could have happened. This is where it's going to lead me.
It's crazy.
And so another month goes by, and I'm like, okay, Amanda, I'm ready. Like, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. And we did. We rolled into a Trinity church.
Rolling in.
We did, and I was skeptical. I looked at you like you were crazy.
Yeah.
And you were like, and you were like, you had the boys already signed in. You're like, this is where they're going to go. I was super worried about Canon. But they, you know, the staff there was amazing. Like, here's headphones. I got this. I made these arrangements. Like, this is what we got for him. And I was just like, okay. Like, and somebody
he has
here
thrived. And I just like,
it's beyond anything. Yeah. Him and Mr. Jim, they're best friends.
Mr. Jim volunteers every Sunday to be with Canon. And they like tour the campus.
They do.
For spiders.
Yeah. And they do. I mean, it's just like they're best friends. And one, you know, at one of the very first evaluations that we ever had for Canon, we were told a lot of things that Canon would never do. He would never talk. He would never walk. He would never have friendships. Like, all of these things were never.
All he's doing.
And he does them now in like. The other day I got in the mail his testing results from 4th grade. He is age appropriate in reading. He reads at an age-appropriate level. And I'm like, okay, coming from the people who told me that he wasn't ever going to comprehend.
That's the thing. Changing the script, I feel like we allow the noise to tell us what we are capable of.
1000%.
And Canon and you have said, no, I'm not listening.
Yeah.
I am going to change the script here.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, goosebumps. And that's, like, the goal of today. We should wrap it up soon. But, like, because we're going to talk more and there's so much more here. There is. But, like, just to be able to see, like, what you've gone through and allowing, like, no, I'm gonna change this for the good. Yes. And I'm going to fight for what I believe, that for my son, for my health, for me. Yes, there's these dark places, but like you said, those dark places, I'm never going to go back there.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I refuse.
Yes.
So this is incredible.
And that's kind of how, like, with Canon, you know, he really gives you a perception of life that nothing really matters. Because in his brain, like, his Mr. Jim at church, you know, and having Jared meet him at the door and harass him, and, you know, they go back and forth, but it's just like these little things. That's all he cares about. You know, like, he doesn't care what your clothes are, what you look like, what you drive, how much money you got in your pocket. What he really wants is for you to own a gym so he can just show up there and do what he wants.
Sit on the box jumps and be like, "Hi, Miss Amanda."
But he if you're around him, you get to see the world through his eyes. That nothing really matters. You know, his joy and whatever brings him joy, that's what his day to day. And so
he lives within the moment.
Yes. And I think that's what, you know, going back to losing my dad and finding running, that's kind of what happened for me, was I needed to take a step back. It still took me because my dad passed in January 2020. I did not approach Amanda until the summer of 2022, and I just said, "Hey, let me run this by you, and you tell me what you think." And mind you, I had been in the gym. You had transitioned here, so I knew that I was strong. And back when I started running years ago, I was not lifting weights. And so I kind of had this mentality of like, okay, I think I could start running. Like, I think I'm ready to dive into that and whatever we need to do. But I was worried about my body. I didn't want to get hurt. And I had been hurt without a coach and without a plan previously. And so we did. You put me through a 4-month, no, it was like 3.5 month training plan.
And you did amazing.
And came out with a half marathon. In the rain. By myself.
Yes, because they
looping
canceled.
A mile.
Well, of course, the race canceled the day of. Like,
yep,
but she was like, "I'm going to do this," and I think you had to do that.
I did
to prove to yourself, like, okay, another hurdle. I have done this.
Yeah.
So it's just like that's just incredible. Like to realize, okay, this is something you had to do for yourself. Like all the grief.
Yep.
All the things that have held you back. Is being able to be like, no, I can do this again. Yeah. And I can find healing in it.
I did.
Yeah.
But it was all of those things. And that morning when it got canceled, you texted me and you're like, you were on it. You were like, I got this race and you can do this and you can do that. And I was like, I don't think I can do that. I think I need to do it right now. Like, I'm coming to your house.
Let's go.
And I was there probably 30 minutes later.
And it's crazy, though. Let's just talk about running community one more time before we say goodbye. Her friends were there.
Yep.
They made a sign. Like, literally in an hour, we all figured it out. We got it done. She ran her race. And,
my friends showed up at...
that's the beauty of this.
Like, mile 8. With signs, yelling at me. And I wanted to go home. And I had no reason to stay. And I remember, my brain was like, just go home. Nobody will even know. Because this one... She starts, and you don't see her for miles. You're just like, I don't even know if she's out here anymore. And so I was like, she won't know. If I go home right now, she won't know. And then literally my friends pulled up, and I was like, oh,
they will know. They are there.
They're looking for me.
They were amazing.
Yep. And it really was. It was like a cleanse. That day was a cleanse of a lot of hurt.
It's amazing.
But it's okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for your time today.
It's been fun.
You're a gift.
You're a gift. Yeah.
We're in it for the long haul. There's more to come on all of this. And we feel like this story is not done. There's so much more.
There is.
It's just,
and I'm grateful that you had me.
Thank you for being on the journey. We got it. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. Oh. It's I told Amanda that I wanted to finish by just talking for a second. I had read on Facebook the comments that people were making about time as a thief. And I read those and I just thought, I don't feel like time took anything from me, but I feel like it's given me incredible opportunities. And, every day there was a young man with Down syndrome, and he completed his first full distance Ironman last year. And his whole thing every day was 1% better, 1% better. I'm just, whatever that looks like, I'm going to be 1% better. And then Deion Sanders, he tells his athletes 2% better, whatever that looks like, whatever that 2% is from day to day, that's what we're going to do. And I just thought, I feel more, it's more relatable to just want to be better with the time that we have. And so I feel like that's kind of my challenge for anybody who's stuck with us this long, is to just think about, what has time given you, or what could you do, and running for us. And me in particular, I'm just getting back to a training cycle, and it's just like, time's going to pass. What are you going to do about it?
That's good.
And so I'm going to give it heck.
Yeah. Every day counts.
Yep.
Every day counts.
Yep.
So good. Ashley, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for listening. We will be back. We'll see you next time. Bye, friends.